So grocery store prices are not going down anytime soon, and I've decided I'm gonna fight back this year by seeing if I can grow an entire year's worth of potatoes. So you might have seen my other video where we harvested over 200 pounds of potatoes and stored them without a root cellar, but I think I can do better. So we are upping the ante this year. All right, the first step is to get our seed potatoes organized, and I break a few rules with this. So allow me to explain. Most of the gardening gurus will tell you to get certified seed potatoes, and I have done that and it works great, and you can get all kinds of cool varieties. However, there are some years when I don't have my ducks in a row, and this year is one of them. So what I am doing instead is I am going to plant grocery store potatoes. There is one catch though. Grocery store potatoes work just fine for seed potatoes, but you have to get organic ones. Conventional potatoes are usually sprayed with some sort of chemical that prevents them from sprouting, which means that won't work if you're trying to plant and get them to grow. So organic potatoes are what I've used for several years now. I've had zero issue, I've had excellent yields, and so that's what we're using this year. Last year I planted russets because that's what I could find, but they're not really my favorite, so I prefer the starched potatoes like the golds and the reds when I can find them. Seed potatoes, especially the real ones, can be a little pricey. So what I like to do is cut them up to get multiple plantings per potato, especially for bigger potatoes like this one. The way we're gonna do this is to look for the eyes on the potato. And most potatoes have a bunch of eyes, like this little spot here, or this little spot there. And I'm just gonna cut it so each chunk has a nice eye in it. So you can see this half has a bunch of eyes, that's totally fine. I wouldn't cut it up too much, you don't get greedy here, but this is totally fine. I just cut this medium-sized potato into 2 pieces and it should plant up really nice. Okay, once I have cut up my seed potatoes, I want to let them cure for 24 to 48 hours, and all this means is we're just letting this freshly cut side develop a little bit of a skin so it's less prone to rot once we get it into the soil. And this is really easy. I just stick the cut potatoes out on a cookie sheet or in a box and leave them on my countertop for a day or 2, just so they have a chance to dry out a little bit. One of the reasons I love growing potatoes is, well, they taste amazing, but you can really grow them anywhere. So I've grown them all over our property over the last few years. We put them in raised beds, we put them in the ground, we put them in the greenhouse. But more recently, like you may have seen on my other potato video, we tilled up some long strips in between our tree row, and this has worked really, really well. And if we're looking at what you can grow that's going to reduce your budget the most and just give you the most food to fill your pantry, potatoes have got to be one of the #1 things on my list. So today we are planting an entire row. Last time I did this, we harvested between 200 and 250 pounds. We're gonna see if we can do even better this year, but first we got to get the bed ready. So Christian tilled this up last week. Now we're gonna put some boards in the middle to create a walkway, lay down our irrigation, and then we'll plant on either side. Getting the board straight is harder than it looks, so don't judge us. Okay, we have our boards down, we have the sprinkler irrigation pipe laid out. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And now we're gonna dig our trenches for the potatoes. There's a lot of opinions on how far apart to plant them, how deep to plant them. I usually stick to about 6 inches deep, 4 to 6 inches. I do not measure it with a ruler. And then, I don't know, 10 to 12 inches apart or so. We're just going by guesses and eyeballing at this point. So I like to usually plant my potatoes mid-May, towards the end of May, because that's around our last frost date. However, I'm a little late this year. It's the first week of June. We're just now getting this done because life didn't allow. Sorry for the wind, guys. It's a little breezy here today, but I think they'll be okay. Potatoes don't love to be frozen. Once they have their leaves up out of the ground, they don't like a lot of snow. So better safe than sorry. plant these guys, you want to plant them cut side down if you're using cut potatoes. If you're using whole potatoes, it doesn't really matter. And like I showed you yesterday, all these have an eye, so that's going to put the eye facing up. And this is really easy. You just stick them in the soil and cover them up. This is Kayla, by the way. She's here working for us, doing all sorts of things. So you're going to be seeing more of her on the videos. All right, now all that's left is to cover them up.
What is it about the ants, Bridger?
Well, there was these 2 ants that were under a piece of wood, and they're carrying another ant on top of the wood.
Oh, cool.
Kayla, can you help me? It's the other side.
Potato machine.
Okay, a little potato math. So we planted 18 pounds of seed potatoes. According to the estimates, you can get around 3 to 5 pounds of a yield at harvest time per seed potato planted. So we counted out how many potatoes we have in the rows. We have 137. So if we go on the low end of that range, we multiply that times 3, that puts us at about 400 pounds of potatoes we stand to gain. Now, if we go on the high end of that, that's close to 700 pounds of potatoes in this row. Now, obviously, I don't need 700 pounds, but I'm probably not gonna get that much anyway, because we're gonna have things like water, and maybe we don't mound certain potato plants enough. So there's some factors to consider. But even if we go super conservative and only get 300 pounds, we're gonna be sitting pretty. So once it starts getting really hot, we'll probably water these every day or at least every other day. And we have the lines laid out. So this is semi-automated, but it's not hooked up yet. So today we're just doing it the old-fashioned way, just to get them wet so they start growing. So this setup might look a little intimidating if you've never grown potatoes before, but I want to assure you that you don't need a giant row with a drip system in order to grow a really decent crop of potatoes. I want to show you a few of the other ways I've done it over the years. So this is inside of our greenhouse. And we actually planted these potatoes early this spring. So these will be the potatoes we eat towards the beginning of the summer. And the ones you just saw us plant, we will be able to eat late summer into fall and throughout the winter. But potatoes can really thrive anywhere. In this greenhouse, we have raised beds of sorts. I've grown them in my big raised bed garden that you might have seen in my other videos. A lot of people will grow them in things like trash cans or tubs or even the grow bags. All you do is put a layer of potatoes down and then you just keep adding soil into the container because potatoes do like to be covered. So the sky is the limit. And honestly, even if you live in an apartment and you have a balcony or just a patio, you can do this. So tubs like this are an option. You put soil at the bottom, you put some potatoes down, and then you just add soil as you go. Now, as far as maintenance on the potato plants, they don't take a lot. It's advised that you mound them up a few times during the growing season, which just means you take your hoe, you drag some dirt around the base of the plant and bury some of the bottom leaves. This enables the potato to grow more potatoes underground. But I will confess, there have been many years where I've done that once, or I've done it half-heartedly, or I've not done it at all because life got in the way and I still had a really decent crop. So the goal is for these potatoes to last us through the winter once they're harvested at the end of the summer. Now, that might be a little tricky because like you saw in my other video, I don't have a root cellar, so I'll be keeping them in my basement. It's not ideal, but it works. But one trick that I will be using is when we get into February and March, and once the potatoes start to get a little shriveled, they're not as crisp and are not quite as good. They're still edible, but not as delicious. I'm gonna be using those as seed potatoes for the following year. So if I plant those potatoes in my greenhouse, in February or March, they'll be growing and I'll be able to eat some little new baby potatoes around June. So that is one way that you can stretch this harvest out, even if they're not going to be edible, you know, as a baked potato all the way up till the following growing season. And that's what's really cool about these plants here. These came from seed potatoes that we harvested last September. So these plants here are the result of some grocery store potatoes I bought in May of 2021, and they are still giving, and it's pretty cool. We'll be eating these in probably a month or so. So of course, the planting is just the beginning. If you'd like to see my strategy for storing hundreds of pounds of potatoes without a root cellar, check out this video.